thing. Well, that's great if you're the user, but if you think about it from the IT person's perspective, from the IT person's perspective, now you've not just made yourself more vulnerable, you've doubled and tripled the avenues at which you can be vulnerable. And so we're going to get into some of those situations today and how and what are the best ways to kind of combat that, and how Microsoft and ACP will be able to help take and tailor some of these solutions around your needs to make sure that you're removing yourself from being that vulnerable person or company to being able to be more proactive, not just a reactive way to help solve. I'll say that, in the spot where somebody is either coming at you from a invading your invading your company's data. We'll put it like that. Next slide. And here's a couple of highlights from people that we all have heard of before: Department of Homeland Security and the World Health Organization. These two organizations are obviously involved in many facets all over the world to be able to take and get a good view of what's happening out there. And both of these statements are basically saying, hey, since the start of COVID, we have seen an increase drastically in phishing emails, different scams, things like that. And so a couple of things that we're going to highlight is that just in this past year, they've seen an increase in over well, it's not the increase, they're saying 50% of all small businesses have seen some type of an attack in the last year. Prior to that, most of the attacks happened to, the statistic I believe that I had was about 65% of SMBs are the subjects of attacks. And we'll get into some of those reasons why in just a few minutes, but the average cost to mitigate or to remove yourself from said attack, whether it's ransomware or whatever, basically costs around $150,000. I actually think that is a little low. I've seen other ones that range up to about 170K. And the problem that starts to create, one, is, I hate wasting money, period, but let alone if somebody's hijacking you, holding something for ransom, right? Most businesses that are in the SMB market, they don't have $60,000 sitting in the bank that is not already earmarked for improvements, for hiring a new head, for doing something, improving infrastructure, whatever that is, let alone $150,000, $160,000, $70,000. The other statistic that's not shown here as well is that most of those folks that go through like a ransomware type of attack are attacked again within a year and a half. Up to 70% of those folks get attacked a second time. Now, when you think about, okay, well, if we're just attacked, how is Microsoft going to help us now if they're already in? Well, that's the thing, is that through using, M365, some of the security features around that basically think as your house, the front door has been open to your house. Well, now what we're going to take and do is we're going to put, a fence, and then around that, we're going to put a moat, and then we're going to put up security cameras. We're going to take and help build up the security around that to prevent it from happening in the future, close all those doors that they opened, and be able to take and secure it in a way that it's going to make it, I'm not going to say impossible, because anything is possible, because the folks that are trying to do this don't have a time frame that they're working on. However, when you start stacking up and layering security in certain ways, it's going to make it, they're going to look for low-hanging fruit. They're going to look for somebody who doesn't have that type of security built in and around their office, around their company, around their data and their end users' data. So when you start building those things out, they go, it's not worth it, and just move on. So that is one of the things that either happens, or if you have very specific data that they want, it's going to still make it near impossible to try to get. So, but we'll get into more of those features, some more of those sets, and how we make it really hard for that to happen. Next slide. So most of the times I boiled this down to about 3 general questions that most end users, most small to medium-sized businesses are asking is, how can we do work from home better? How can we do that remote work better? The other piece is how can we maintain a certain level of security, and what is acceptable and what's not an acceptable level of security? And then how can we do it, for a lesser cost? So we're going to talk about the lesser cost piece first, because I really want to make sure that we kind of have that as our standard. Is that when you're looking at like the numbers that we just talked about, $150,000 is the average. It could be more, some of it could be less, but it's most of the time that's the average of what it costs if a breach happens. So when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, and some of them are more, and I've seen it, um, when we're talking about a few dollars, incremental potentially, those few dollars add up. It's well worth that difference. And Microsoft has taken steps to be able to help you guys utilize the security side of it without it impacting how you do business. And I want to make sure that that's understood as well. I'll call it livable security, to be able to take and actually go through the motions, knowing that you're secure in all different ways and facets, so that it's not impacting how you do business. It's just securing you much better. So doing remote work better. Being able to take and work from any location is, we already started off piece by saying that, right? We were working pre-COVID, or I was anyway, from, coffee shops, restaurants, hotel rooms, from airplanes, from airports, from just about anywhere you could think of. Or when I wasn't on the road, I was working here from my office in South Carolina in my house. And so for any company to be able to make sure that they are doing what they need to make sure that their information is secure, there's a couple of things that Microsoft has, and we'll get into these a little bit, but some of them are conditional access. There are certain data loss prevention guidelines that we can put into place that help with when you're sharing sensitive data on ways not to do it and prevent it from accidentally happening. Because if we're all perfectly honest, the biggest threat to any company out there are your employees. They're not doing it with any malintent, 99% of the time. It's just how sophisticated some of these intruders are getting. We've all heard of social engineering emails. I could get something from Elise, and if the email comes from her, and of course we've talked, a bunch, and I see something, I just click on it and open it up. But of course, being in my role and what I do take a couple of minutes to look over a few things. We think we've all seen some of those pieces that come across Facebook or some, email thing that a friend sends you, and the words have all the correct letters, but they're all jumbled up. And so you can still read it as you go down it, but the words themselves aren't spelled correctly. The letters are changed. Same thing can happen. So if you get something from Elise at ACP, but maybe it's Elise at CPA or CAP or something like that. Maybe they've switched two of the letters in her name. So instead of it being ALEASE, maybe they switched the first E and A. And so you see some of those little pieces in there that have switched up. That that's not correct. But if you're just used to looking at it and thinking what it should be, your brain may play tricks on you. And so you're like, oh, okay, it's her, click. And here's a link she wants me to go to. And you click on that link, and then they're in. So there's some of those things that happen now. The way Microsoft kind of helps combat that is that it will come up and say, hey, you've never received an email from this person before, and it'll come up with a little disclaimer. And then that could stop you enough and pause you to go, this is supposed to come from her. To be able to take and train your employees enough to look out for those little things, to give them those flags and those tools help out tremendously. And so being able to take and implement some of those pieces help to curb the ability for those intruders to take and be a phishing attack, or to get in and be able to hold data or sensitive information for ransom, those types of things. And then being more secure. We talked about it, cell phones, laptops, tablets, all that stuff. Microsoft has a really good solution around in their Intune product with MDM, mobile device management. and then also MAM, mobile application management. We'll get into that in just a little bit, but there's a couple of things here, and then you'll start to see them build on each other so that if you get through one roadblock, there's another one. If you get through that one, there's another one. So it starts to make it near impossible if they're looking for something easy. But we'll keep going. Next slide. And this one builds out a couple of times if you want to go ahead and do that. There we go. And of course, there's the big bold, writing at the very top. Why should SMBs invest in security? And I'm sure a bunch of you are not just asking that, but you're also asking to what level. So in through this, when I first read it the first time, and going through this piece of it, that I thought, wow, that makes them sound like their IT guys don't know what they're doing. And that's not the case. The biggest case is with most of us, if we're taking and we've got, 10, 15, 20, 50, 100 employees, and somebody, their laptop or their desktop go down, you replace it with the newer best breed of whatever. Standardizing on some hardware does play a role in security. And here's why. Because when you're running certain levels of hardware, you get to standardize on a platform of your software as well. So if you have a small IT staff and they have to now take and work against multiple levels of hardware and multiple versions of software and multiple upgrades that have to be done and maintenance and all this stuff, you're adding to the workload of those folks that is basically overwhelming. And so it's not that they don't have the skill that's needed. It's just maybe that the environment is so disjointed that they're not able to take and get the best results for their effort. I hope that makes sense. So in going through and doing that, for instance, if you're looking at M365 Business Premium as a SKU, it has the most bang for the buck out there. It comes with a host of security features, and it's made for 300 users or less. But in that piece of it, if you are running Windows 7 Professional, which is end of support, so if you need to talk to Elise and get you guys upgraded to something that's actually being supported. 8.1 Pro, you get a free upgrade when you buy that license. That free upgrade can take you to Windows 10 Professional so that you can then take your entire environment and have them all running the same software. It's more secure, and there's a bunch of reasons behind it, but that is the best platform to be running currently. So when you're able to get all in the same software, similar, if not the same type of hardware, their job becomes much easier. And when you're enlisting folks like ACP to come in and help you guys in that way, it makes their job easier, but it allows them to give you the full benefit of the breadth of all the products and services that they have for you to make you as secure as humanly possible. So there's a couple of questions that you should be asking when it comes in for support and service that you're looking for. Is not only, hey, how secure are we going to be, but what levels of support and security do you offer? And because I know ACP so well, I know exactly what they do. Next slide. So before we get into all the different specific features and functionality and some of the things I believe that would help you folks in the future, is why would Microsoft be a good option for you? Now, this slide looks really busy and there's a lot of numbers and a lot of words up there and little dotted lines, but this is the biggest thing that separates Microsoft from some of the other security vendors out there. Think of the optics, the window into all the internet traffic that Microsoft has a view of. All the O365 stuff, all the M365 stuff. A lot of folks use Azure as a way for authentication. Think about their Bing website, their Bing search engine. They've scanned over 18 billion web pages, 6.5 trillion threat signals analyzed daily. The way that they go through and all the different stuff that they do, was that 470 billion emails scanned, stuff like that. The authentication for Azure, I believe, is up to 450 billion different authentications daily. So Microsoft, if you will think about it this way, that they get to look through a lens at all that traffic. They're not looking specifically at your data. They're not reading your emails, about your plans for the weekend or your business deals that you're working on. What they're looking at is, hey, did that person authenticate in a normal fashion? They use artificial intelligence and machine learning to do a lot of the grunt work to look for patterns, for things that the human eye might miss. And as they're going through and they're looking at this stuff, if I take and log in, and this is part of conditional access, um, if I take and log in from my home here in South Carolina, if 2 hours later somebody tries to sign on with my credentials in Phoenix, Arizona, it's geographically impossible for me to get from one side of the continent to the other in 2 hours. They would block that because I've authenticated in. They would see somebody else is trying to do that and they would shut that down and then potentially prompt me to say, hey, you may want to change your credentials. We think that they have been compromised. When you start to see features and functionalities like that, they see those things happen. Beyond that side of it, with all the different authentications through the Azure side daily in the billions, hundreds of billions, they can go through and go, okay, this is not a normal action. And they'll move that aside. They have 3,500 security specialists working at Microsoft. They spend over $1 billion a year on security now. This year, I think that's probably reached about $1.5 billion, maybe more. And so that's a lot of effort, a lot of time. And when you have this type of view into what's happening in our world out there on the internet and how people are authenticating, you're learning those behaviors on what they do and how they do it. When something starts to change, it sticks out like a sore thumb and they grab it, analyze it, figure out what's going on. So that's just the one window that they have into it. No other security provider has that type of window into what's actually happening. So that would be, for me, that was a very powerful why. One other thing I'll add to it is you see the little blue symbol right at the very bottom of the screen below the 200 plus global cloud consumers round window. That's Xbox. So not only O365, M365, how many Xboxes are in our homes? I don't actually have one, but many people I know do. So when you're thinking they also have a window into that, what's normal there? How are people utilizing that information? And they watch that too. So that starts to grow. So it's not just when you're doing work or when you're searching on Bing for whatever it is you're searching for. The same thing when Xbox logs in, they have a piece that looks at that as well to look for anomalies. Next window, next slide. So Microsoft doesn't normally take and promote themselves and puff themselves up and go, hey, look at us. A couple of years ago, they released a piece called Defender of Security. It wasn't great by all means. And I kind of wish they would change the name of it today because they still use the word Defender today. But Defender has grown in leaps and bounds. So this is the Gartner's Magic Quadrant. This is where Microsoft sits today, up in the upper right-hand quadrant, and that's where you want to be. That is the leaders box. And because they've taken and grown to that piece, Microsoft doesn't take and put out their own paid type of advertisement to show how good they are. They let industry-leading standards take and show that for them. And for them to be in that top quadrant at Gartner's, that's saying a lot because Gartner's doesn't care, who does what or where or how. They just try to post the truth. These are the best products. These are, for these different standards. And that's what this shows. And the next slide actually shows the same type of scenario. Well, no, sorry, it doesn't. But that piece of it just goes to show exactly how Microsoft has taken and grown. And because of their investments, not only in personnel, like I said, 3,500 employees and $1 billion a year, has put them in that top quadrant. Now the next slide. Sorry, Elise. So defending against cyber threats. Here's one unique way that Microsoft takes and actually helps out. So when you're getting our emails from day to day, they come through and you'll see ATP stands for Advanced Threat Protection, safe links, safe attachments, anti-phishing. As we get an email, Microsoft will take, and if somebody sends you a link, they scan it. Is it a known offender? Does it lead you to somewhere harmful? Is it something that you've seen before? And not only that, is it from a trusted source? Is this a potential harmful link from somebody you've never communicated with? Does this link send you to somewhere else and then they ask you to click on another link? That's the type of stuff that most people don't think about, but Microsoft is looking out for you to help block any of those things. If it's suspicious, they will take and do what they call sandboxing. They will take that link, they move it over to a virtual machine that's isolated from the world so it won't hurt anybody. And it will actually be your email. You will not have received it yet. They will take this, they will move it over and sandbox it, click on it and see what happens. Where does it go? Is it harmful? Is there a virus built into it? Is there a phishing attack? Some way somebody's looking for more information. And if it is, you won't get the email. I have received a couple of emails that were like that the link was removed, or it said, hey, there was a harmful attachment that was included in this email. It's been removed. Same thing for those attachments. It will scan the attachment, again, not looking at the data that's inside of it. It's not going to be the invitation to a webinar from ACP. It's going to look at any links, anything malicious that's involved there. And if it is, it's going to remove it and notify you that, hey, somebody tried to send you an email that had some malicious content into it. One of the things to do is, if you are not sure that it is a valid attachment, if something looks funny, if you get an email from, say, Fidelity Investments, just as a name, I don't know of anything that's going on with them, I'm just saying something in general, and it's got a link and says, hey, click here to check out some new things that are happening in your Fidelity Investments portfolio. Maybe don't go to that link. Maybe go to your bookmark to where you go in, sign in there, and look for some new stuff, because maybe that link is malicious. Hover over the link and see if, when it pops up with the URL, it says, hey, this is going to take you to www.blah, blah, blah. Does it say Fidelity or does it say something else? Because that's also a way that they could take and be trying to manipulate you. And then anti-phishing. So if it knows, kind of like with a safe link, if it's a harmful link or a harmful attachment, that can help protect you from a phishing attack. If something seems odd, I know at the top of my email, I have a little button that says report phishing, and my company takes and sends me, I'd say no less than 3 to 5 a month, where they're trying to make sure that we're all paying attention. It goes through and you see something kind of wonky, and then it draws my attention. I look over it, do what I know to do. Hey, is it from somebody I know? Is the link taking me where it says it's going to take me? And if it doesn't, I go up and I click phishing, report a phishing, and it goes out and it'll either pop up instantly and say, hey, good job, just making sure you're on your toes, type thing. Or it'll go to my IT group. And in that, it goes to my team and goes to Microsoft, and they will work on it and look, and they'll come back and be like, hey, this is fine. You can do what you need to do with that email. Or they'll come back and say, hey, thank you, and give you a report back on it. Next slide. So when you take in those different pieces all together and you start layering in stuff like multi-factor authentication. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I believe Microsoft released that they were going to go to passwordless authentication. If your employees are your biggest threat, it can be because they could accidentally give away their passwords, right? Their credentials to access a system. Well, if you take away those passwords, they can't lose them. Nobody can steal a password if you don't have it. And so in that piece, you're thinking, wow, well, how am I going to authenticate? Through multi-factor authentication, like when I do my MFA, I log in, it will send me a notification to a Microsoft app, to an authenticator app I have on my phone. So this is my personal device. So the first step of security, if somebody took and stole a password, tried to sign in, they'd have to physically have my cell phone or have access to it to clone it and to do all these other crazy things, which still wouldn't get past them because it would go to that authentication app. I have to open up that app, click approve, and then I have to authenticate with either a password that I know or I choose to use my thumbprint. So they couldn't duplicate my phone because I have it on my presence, and they don't have my thumbprint, which is near impossible to take and duplicate. So no password to be stolen. Through to the app, click approve, hit my thumbprint, and then I'm in. And once authenticated, then you could be set up to have what they call a single sign-on. So once your employee has been authenticated in, they have access to all the different software platforms, because once they've been authenticated, do they really need to sign in to each and every individual system that you guys have and use? No. If it's all set up to run through through MFA and authenticate through that way. So coming down to conditional access. So let's say that I am able to authenticate in. Let's talk about keeping your data safe. When it comes down to being able to access certain points of data inside your company, I'm a sales guy. I don't need to have access to HR files. So through those HR files, as we go through, you can narrow that scope down to who has access there. What's a very short list of people? It's going to be your HR department, right? So you could have just those folks. Well, where do they have access from and from what device? Okay, they can only access that data from their company issued laptop. Well, what are the conditions around the laptop? They have to be VPN'd in. So even their security, they have to get the credentials to be able to log in through VPN, potentially have, multi-factor authentication for that using their company laptop. And you can narrow it down even more. It's got to be within a certain geography. I believe ACP has customers that only do business in the States. Why would they need to get emails from anybody outside of the continental US? More than likely, it would be because it would be set up for some type of phishing attack or something malicious. You can't do business outside the US anyway, so what would you need it for? And you can set it up to where you could have one-offs to allow certain type of interaction. So that can be done, but as a general rule, so now you've segued it down to a certain amount of people can get to those HR files only through VPN, only on a company device, and only from 8 to 6, Monday through Friday. Pre-COVID, you could even lock that down further, and you still can, but you could lock it down further to where they have to be hooked to the physical network inside your brick and mortar to access those sensitive files. And I just use that as one example, but that's how we talk about layering on security so that you can lock it down to where it's not making it hard to get into if you're approved, if it's set up within your user rights to go through and do that. If you are one of those HR employees and you're working in that department, you log in and it just knows, yep, that's one of your files that you can just go get. So you could do that with sales data, with banking information. Think about hospital systems and HIPAA compliance. Think about any type of industry where certain information is being held. You can take and protect it by taking and layering on those types of informations, and conditional access can help you do that as well. Next slide. This is one of my favorite ones. It's around securing the device. We talked about it briefly about MDM and MAM. And so we'll get into some of the capabilities around a product that Microsoft calls Microsoft Intune. And one thing to highlight before we switch to the next slide is that I have an Android device. Some of my team has Apple devices, so they're on the iOS. And some of us have Windows PCs, some of them have Apple PCs, things like that. This will work across all those different platforms. Next slide. So for me, here's my Samsung phone. I obviously don't go anywhere without it. Um, that is my device. So my company takes and they basically load a mobile device management on there that is actually mobile application management. What that means is my access to Outlook, to my Teams folder, to or to all those files, to different things like that, my OneDrive, everything out there that I have loaded on my phone, they can take and lock out, not change the password, make it to where no password works. You have to be an administrator in our system to get access to it. Or they can even go as far as to blow away that application, remove it from your phone. So whether I'm running through an airport and drop my phone and just can't find it, they could take and do that. Or let's say I just give them a call and say, hey guys, I'm turning in my 2 weeks notice, but more likely it's going to be a 2 hour notice. I'm going to the competition. I'm out of here. See ya. They can lock me out or blow away those devices completely. If it's a mobile device management where it is a company provided device, whether it's a laptop, tablet, cell phone, whatever, they then have full control of it. They can basically make it a dead brick. So if the same scenario happens, somebody loses it, it gets stolen, somebody's quitting and going to competition, whatever happens, you can take and blow away the credentials so that no one can use it or log into it. You can wipe the device back to like factory settings and just clear all that information out. You have choices on how to handle those situations to what you feel is appropriate for your company, whatever those rules are that you want to set up for your company and how it wants to handle that. Microsoft has a piece of that, and that's Microsoft Intune. So those pieces are really good just because of the industry and the position that I'm in, where I'm running around the countryside most of the time pre-COVID, and hopefully here before too long, be able to start doing it again. I've got stories upon stories about some of my friends. I show up to a conference or to a customer meeting, and the laptop's still sitting back at the Chili's at the Dallas Fort Worth airport. Something like that. It just happens. Next slide. I think this builds out one more time, or 4 more times actually. There we go. Thank you. Again, this is reiterating at the top of what I've been talking about, layered security and how that's integrated into, O365, portions of O365, M365 for sure, and Teams as well. All this is based on Azure Security Framework. So if you set up that you are in banking, finance, there are a list of things that it will take and say, hey, here's some number sequences that you're unable to share via email or over Teams, because the same rules apply to Teams. That if it's a social security number, you can't just take and say, hey, here's my social and send it over. Here's a credit card number. Here's a birthday. Here's a PIN number. Here's a patient number. Those types of things aren't allowed to be shared unless it's from, a secure device to a secure device. You set up those parameters, and also, HIPAA compliance, things like that start to apply. And there's a million different types of compliances out there, depending on what type of industry that you're in. So collaborating in real time, hey, that's fantastic. We're doing it now. And I've been doing it so long that I don't know what it's going to be like when I move away from it when I'm on the road. I'm going to feel like I'm going to need to be video chatting over my phone instead of just making a phone call. The different pieces of protecting of identity, that list beneath that, MFA, conditional access, using Windows virtual desktops, things like that. Those are the pieces that you can take and implement now today. I would even say no matter what industry you're in, no matter if you've got 2 employees or 10,000, you need to be using MFA, period, hands down. It's kind of like the sign in front of your house. If you buy a security system, the guys come up and they're talking to you and say, yeah, just having this sign alone that says XYZ security company makes the criminals run away. And me being a sales guy and half comedian, I'm like, how much for the sign then? But that is the same scenario. When somebody is looking to infiltrate your system and they see that you have multi-factor authentication on it, you either have to have something very specific that they want, or they're going to just move on. They're going to look for other low-hanging fruit. But if you're going to go as far as to set up MFA, then for authentication, why don't we take and make that security a little more? And you could set up profiles so that the folks that work in HR, sales, warehousing, whatever other groups you have, let's set up conditional access. And then while we're doing that, why don't we help protect your customers' information? Advanced threat protection, Azure information protection, data loss prevention. You can go through and set those things up so you're not inadvertently or unknowingly or just not meaning to send out that information that is what they call PI, personal identifiable information. And that way you're not only keeping your company's information safe, but you're also keeping your client's information safe, anybody else that you deal with. And I'll use one more analogy around this one because we just talked about Intune, is that everybody remembers the Target breach, right? There were so many millions of credit card numbers stolen, all this stuff. Everybody remembers that, but do you know exactly how it happened? The people had in mind they needed to breach Target. Well, the particular Target place that they breached had an AC company that would come in and work on their HVAC system. So they were there working on the HVAC system. They updated the HVAC system so that they could control it remotely. Well, what happened is the people that wanted to break into Target knew that the people that owned the HVAC company wouldn't be as secure because they didn't have thousands of, or however many millions of credit card numbers. It was Target. So their security wasn't as much. They didn't have the secure pathway. They had access to Target's network, but didn't have it secured. So those guys they breached the AC network, found the Target path, and got to Target through the AC company. You'll be able to go to your customers and do your business the way that you are and say, hey, not only are we taking and securing our stuff, but we're helping secure you as well. Working with some enterprise customers, they will require some of the SMBs that they work with to be up to a certain security standard because of that Target breach. And the one thing to make sure that you guys also understand, there's no difference in the MFA, the conditional access, the Intune, the Azure piece that is included in, say, M365 Business Premium. It's no different than what's included in the E3 and the E5. Yeah, it's made for 300 users and below, and E5 is made for unlimited amount of users. So if you're talking about Coca-Cola and you've got 100,000 employees, you have the same type of security with 300 users or below. You've got 25 employees. You can have the same exact security as they have. It's not a watered down version. It's not a light version. It's the same. There are other features built into the E3 and the E5 licenses that are bigger because some things are needed differently for those big corporations, those big enterprises, just because they have more assets and the way that they set up their systems are a little different, and it's more expensive to the tune of a couple of dollars more. But it's not anything watered down. So you get the same type of MFA as the big guys do, because Microsoft feels that just because you're an SMB, you're more likely to be breached. But with this type of security, it should be the same for you guys, no matter, again, if you have 25 employees or 25,000. Next slide. Boom. Questions. I thought I saw somebody pop one up in there, but I wasn't sure. Well, if you guys do have a question, you want to put it in the chat or come off mute or raise your hand, be more than happy to help answer anything. Definitely appreciate the time and you guys joining. If you do have questions, reach out to your ACP team and talk with them. They'll be more than happy to chat with you around the security side of it, and look forward to taking and helping them out in any way I can. But more importantly, hope that this was useful for you guys.
Thanks so much, Eddie.
No problem.
Go ahead and stop recording.